Hi, everyone. I'm Desiree Sadoff, and welcome to part 2 of the first episode of The Digital Divide, a podcast series that introduces you to some of the more pressing issues we face as digital media consumers regarding cyberculture, online identity, and technology. For this episode, I interviewed 5 people.
Hi, I'm Nikki.
My name is Sammy.
Hi, my name is DK, and I'm a man.
Hello, my name is Emma.
Hi, my name is Lance, and I am excited to be interviewed today.
All of which have varying levels of how they treat the online world, coming together for your listening enjoyment to discuss the complexities of cyberculture. So stick around while we discuss pressing issues within the digital divide. During part 1, I asked the interviewees a bunch of questions regarding identity, and we came up with a couple of connections on how their online world is closely intertwined with their day-to-day lives. But continuing on, we looked closely into another factor, culture. But more specifically, cyberculture. I asked them, how would you define cyberculture, and what does it mean to you personally? And here's how they answered.
I would say cyberculture is that's like a tricky term because when I hear cyberculture, the first thing that comes to my head is honestly like chronically online. Like I don't really interact much when I use the internet. I feel like I'm more of a watcher versus an active participant in cyberculture, which I guess I would define as like the exchange of ideas through different communities.
Love it. Cyberculture, the first thing I think of honestly is just fashion.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, the word cyberculture brings me to like Tron, futuristic, lots of silver, lots of lasers, lots of neon.
You think of it literally as cyber and culture.
Exactly. Pondering on it a little bit more, digging a little bit deeper, everything revolves around something being cyber, the internet. It's effectively impossible to live without it. I would say cyberculture is closely intertwined, if not completely one-to-one ratioed with our existence now.
So, although it's obviously not like a one translation. Culture is a culmination of all sorts of background experiences. The list goes on, there's a ton of them. So cyberculture would just be, in my mind, the co-created atmosphere, expectations, norms, behaviors that people in online communities create, and given various levels of how well they know each other on a more personal basis, or if they simply know each other from the persona that person presents, right? The norms and behaviors and rules and whatever, that's what shapes that culture online. So that's what I would qualify as cyberculture.
Well, so here's the thing. I'm not super, I guess, like versed in media. And like super, I'm chronically online, as we've established. But as we've also established, not as much as other people. Like I very much stick to my niches. But as soon as I get out of that, it is the bile of the internet is just like, oh my God, the hate has turned me into such a cynical person. I mean, of course, I experience things in my real life that have done that to me, but the internet is its own planet, and like Earth, like real life, is its own planet.
It can be pretty competitive and rather not dangerous, but very stressful at times. Like, whenever you do something, you have to think about what impression you leave on other people, or like making sure that you're up to date on certain trends, or like other things that don't, like, so that you don't seem like either a weirdo or uneducated. There's a lot of things that go into it. But as someone that's been online a lot, I think you just eventually think about it subconsciously. But I think there's a lot of, like, cyberculture is very stressful, I'd say. I don't know, as much as the internet is good, there's also a lot of things that can go horribly wrong.
As you heard, we have a variety of different definitions, but one truly stood out among the rest, and that was Sammy's. His exposure to the more harmful side of cyberculture has been a factor in his perception of it, and he defined it as stressful because of these experiences. This is something a lot of people who are online face in their day-to-day interactions. What we both danced around during this part of the interview, however, was the term cancel culture. Cancel culture is most commonly described as the practice or tendency of engaging in mass canceling as a way of expressing disapproval and exerting social pressure. Cancel culture is just another facet of being online and can be seen as extremely harmful, something both Sammy and I have witnessed. Yet, after reading the article, Why We Can't Stop Fighting About Cancel Culture by AJ Romero, I think it's here to stay. You may be asking yourself, why would I say that? However, it's really obvious because throughout her article, Romero goes into a lot of evidence on how cancel culture and the ever similar call out culture trend tend to be really relevant in another way to express free speech. Her stating, that divide seems to be widening and growing more visible, and it isn't purely a divide between ideologies, but also between tactical approaches in navigating those ideological differences in dealing with wrongdoings. However, cancel culture is just another factor of culture within the cyber world. So with that in mind, I wanted to dive deeper into why they defined cyberculture in that way, leading me to ask, how do you feel your personal identity has been shaped through cyberculture?
Definitely Gen Z quarantine context there, but I definitely would say the internet is like what has helped me develop my identity, especially like being lesbian from a small community. I'm like, no one else there had pink hair, no one else there had their nose pierced, no one else there dressed the way I did, but I still did it because I was like, these girls on the internet, they're cool, so I'm gonna be cool, like them, I guess.
So I'll start with the pros and go to the cons because it is a very nuanced answer. I do genuinely think you cannot say that you only negatively there's only negatives to cyberculture because that's inherently not true. I would not have realized what transgenderism is or figuring out my identity without cyberculture. I would not have learned about the genre of music that I listen to. It's like literally K-pop, Vocaloid, even a lot of the alternative rock that I listen to, I would not have found without YouTube. And so without it, genuinely, I don't know what my identity would be right now. So then going on to the cons, I think that every single fear and phobia in existence is exponentially increased. That not only attacks you on that plane, but also highlights the fact like, yeah, you should feel insecure. There are people who are half your age doing twice as much, and they're now a household name. It creates this competition with people who you would have never known existed otherwise. And that's horrifying to me.
Oh my gosh, so much. I feel like the internet raised me, not so much as the kids now, where like it is quite literally raising them. But I didn't learn a lot from my parents, and my parents honestly did not divulge a lot to my sister and I growing up, and they sent us to like Catholic school growing up, so we were really shielded from the world. So any insight I got into the world was from the internet. I feel like it shaped a lot of who I was then, but also who I am now as far as like aesthetics and like things that I do like to read or ingest, or like the kind of art that I like. 'Cause on Tumblr was like where I found a lot of like I guess the creative images that I liked as far as like colors and like paintings and whatever, and poetry. Big on that. But again, it was like I stuck to my niches. Like I stuck to like only following music artists that I liked, or like fan pages. In answering that question, I also have to mention that it's like those niches and me searching for those like through the internet.
That's an interesting question. Okay, so remember how I said that my answer was a 1 in terms of usage, and that's because the platforms that I use, number 1, are not very mainstream at all. And number 2, they're very, very niche and specific to a certain community that does, in fact, have its very unique cyber culture. You know, and maybe this is just me. For me, I think it's actually mainly been the reverse. I don't know that my cyberculture persona per se has influenced my real life persona. I'm sure maybe subconsciously and subpsychologically has, but me specifically, I think I have more actively tried to make that online persona match my individual persona outside. Like that persona that I created, specifically for moderation purposes, like that persona, I wanted to make sure that the version of myself that I am outside of cyberspace actually came through in my cyberspace persona.
I wouldn't say that I've been shaped more as I just try being myself on the internet. Because it's more like, unlike other people who maybe have a persona, like a full-on persona on the internet, where they entertain other people with it and so on and so forth. I think that I just try being myself more than anything.
As expected, some of these answers were a bit on the longer side and went more into detail about how each person views their identity through cyberculture. From Emma, who found out more about her sexuality, and Lance, who found out more about her gender identity, respectively, through seeing representation online, and then Mickey, who found a community within her niche online and she couldn't have found another way to connect with them. And then you have the two men I interviewed, DK and Sammy, who would say that their personas online are just a slightly different version of themselves, but stay to the core of their values and how they would act in real life. It got me thinking. It's the community that influenced them on how they truly have that connection to cyberculture. Let me elaborate. There is a lot of research in how communication is based in digital formats, but one specific thought came to mind, and that was the engagement of online culture stands to broaden a person's perspective of the world around them, opening up possibilities and ideas one might never think of for themselves. This term is most commonly known as intercultural communication. And when researching more into that, I found the article, Understanding Cyberculture from Perspective of Intercultural Communication by Zhao Yuming, where she goes into how crucial this form of communication is to the future of online culture and social media alike, saying, these platforms provide opportunity for cross-cultural engagement. Users can touch bases with people from different cultural backgrounds in widely separated geological locations. This is the exact thing we heard about from Lance, Mickey, and Emma, who were able to find a piece of themselves through online and really configure their perception of life. Throughout hearing about their experiences, I realized that cyberculture is truly built upon the different forms of culture that we are exposed to, like the two that we discussed today, cancel culture and intercultural communication. But it doesn't stop there. At the end of this interview, and after hearing about all their experiences, I knew there was only one question I could ask. Can you share any personal anecdotes or lessons you learned from your experiences navigating cyberculture that you believe could benefit others?
I think the obvious word, you hear it everywhere, you see it all the time on everything, but there's a reason people say it all the time, is moderation. I think social media as a whole is a very tremendous tool. If you want to learn anything, social media will help you do that. If you want to look into aesthetics, outfit pieces, if you want to learn how to do a backflip, if you want to, the world is your oyster. But just don't be on there so long that you sort of neglect its usefulness.
If I were going to give advice or just something to think about, it would just kind of go back to the things we've been talking about. And it would be something along the lines of, just because it is easier and more acceptable to say certain things does not always mean you should actually say. Just because other people disclose certain things in a certain way does not necessarily mean you should do that too. I think it might behoove people to treat their online personas in some ways, not all, a little bit more like their face-to-face personas.
Don't put your name in your TikTok and then share crazy things.
I'd say be careful more than just blindly accepting things as they are. Some people might approach you with different intentions than you think, and then things might go really wrong. So be careful. Don't share your real name nor your location. Country, I'd say, is fine. But don't share anything super specific, like where you may live, because it is scary what some people are able to do with what little information they get.
To like post and seek what feels comfortable to you, and don't feel like pressure from internet culture to be hateful, right? Or to like maybe like go to pages or follow pages that you don't really like, but other people are, or whatever. Or I don't know, I guess the age old advice of like be true to yourself. And so I just like how weird, I constantly feel like I'm also being judged because I'm not posting, or like because when I do post, it's like only certain things.
From lesson to lesson, one clear thread was obvious with their answers. Keep yourself safe online. We are the ones exposed to such a turbulent landscape. We got to make the best of it. I was asked during one of my interviews what my piece of advice would be, and honestly, I didn't have an answer. But I put some thought into it, and now I think I got something. My advice would be, the internet is what you make of it. From finding new things about yourself and your identity, to the way it shapes your culture and experiences outside of your bubble. So be safe, but don't shy away from connections you could make. But be smart and try not to dox yourself. A huge thank you to Lance, DK, Emma, Sammy, and Mickey for letting me interview them on these topics. They took every question I threw at them so seriously, and I couldn't have asked for a better group of guests to share their experiences. I learned so much about them and their past and where they're going online, and I hope they can make another appearance in the future. I hope you enjoyed part 2 of our exploration into identity and cyberculture. Subscribe so you may be informed when we release episode 2, where we will go more into how technological advances are creating a different cultural landscape. I'm your host, Desiree Sadoff, and I continue to implore you to learn more about the digital divide.